Let me ask you something that might make you uncomfortable. When was the last time you spent an entire week without speaking to anyone from your family? Not by choice, but because life simply got in the way. Their schedules, your routines, the miles between you. Now imagine that week stretching into a month, then 2 months, then becoming your new normal. Here's what nobody talks about at retirement parties or family gatherings. Right now, at this very moment, over 3 million people just like you in the UK are living completely alone. That's nearly 1 in 3 seniors. And the truly sobering part, most of them never saw it coming. They had plans. They had family who promised to visit. They had a spouse who was supposed to grow old beside them. But life, as it tends to do, had other ideas. I'm not sharing this to frighten you. I'm sharing it because I've spent the last 15 years studying what separates seniors who thrive in solitude from those who merely survive it. And what I discovered challenges everything we've been told about aging, family, and what it really takes to build a life that doesn't crumble when circumstances change. Stay with me, because by the end of our time together, you're going to understand exactly why the seniors who planned for independence ended up far happier than those who planned for dependence. We need to start by addressing the elephant in the room. Somewhere along the way, we absorbed this comforting narrative that family would always form our safety net, that our children would naturally gravitate toward caring for us, that marriage vows meant we'd definitely have a partner through our final decades. And you know what? For some people, that's exactly how it unfolds. But let's look at the mathematics of modern life for a moment. Your children, assuming you have them, are statistically likely to live an average of 200 miles away from you. They're juggling careers that demand 60-hour work weeks. They're raising children who have soccer practice, piano lessons, and therapy appointments. They're trying to maintain their own marriages, their own friendships, their own mental health. They love you, I'm not questioning that for a second, but love and availability are two entirely different currencies. And spouses, the actuarial tables tell an uncomfortable story. If you're a woman in your 60s, there's a substantial probability you'll outlive your husband by 7 to 15 years. If you're a man, sudden illness or accident can change everything in a single afternoon. I've sat with dozens of people who never imagined they'd be navigating their 70s alone, and yet there they were, facing a reality they'd never prepared for. Your siblings are managing their own aging process, their own health crises, their own shrinking worlds. Your longtime friends are scattering, moving to be near their children, entering care facilities, or simply struggling with mobility issues that make regular socializing impossible. The myth of guaranteed companionship. I'm not painting this picture to be pessimistic, I'm painting it to be realistic. Because here's the liberating truth hidden inside this uncomfortable reality. When you stop expecting others to carry you, you discover just how capable you actually are of carrying yourself. And that discovery, that shift in perspective, changes everything about how you age. Let me tell you about someone I'll call Patricia, though that's not her real name. Patricia spent her entire working life as a nurse. She cared for thousands of patients, showed up for every family emergency, and genuinely believed that the same energy she'd put into relationships would come back to her when she needed it. She had 3 children, all successful, all living within a 90-minute drive. Her retirement plan, if you could call it that, was simple. The kids would check in regularly, and she'd have companionship whenever she wanted it. Reality looked different. Her oldest son got promoted to a position that required constant travel. Her daughter went through a difficult divorce and became consumed with single parenting. Her youngest moved abroad for what was supposed to be 2 years, but turned into permanent relocation. Patricia spent her 68th birthday alone, waiting for phone calls that came 3 days late, each child apologetic, each with completely legitimate reasons for being unavailable. The heartbreaking part? Patricia had never developed interests outside her family.
She'd never cultivated friendships that weren't connected to her children's school communities. She'd never learned to find joy in solitary pursuits. Her entire identity had been built on being needed, and suddenly nobody needed her in the way she expected. She wasn't prepared for independence because she'd never imagined she'd need to. Now contrast that with someone like James, a gentleman I met through a community photography group. James lost his wife at 62, a devastating blow that could have destroyed him. But James had spent his 50s deliberately building what he called his autonomy infrastructure. He'd learned to cook properly, not just reheat things. He'd developed genuine friendships with other men who shared his interest in woodworking. He'd cultivated a meditation practice. He'd gotten comfortable with silence and his own company. When his wife passed, James grieved deeply, but he didn't collapse. He had a framework that held him upright when everything else fell apart. 5 years later, he's one of the most content people I know. Not because he doesn't miss his wife, he absolutely does, but because his happiness doesn't depend on any single person being present. The difference between Patricia and James isn't luck, it's preparation. It's the conscious decision to build a life architecture that stands firm regardless of who walks away or who stays.
So if family can't be your sole support system, what can? This is where most advice gets it wrong. People will tell you to join clubs or stay busy or think positive. That's not useless advice, but it's incomplete. What you actually need is a comprehensive life infrastructure that addresses every dimension of human need: physical, mental, emotional, financial, spiritual, and social. Think of it like a building. You wouldn't construct a house with only a roof and hope for the best. You need a foundation, walls, plumbing, electrical systems, insulation. Each component serves a distinct purpose, and if one fails, the others can compensate until repairs are made. Your life after 60 needs the same multi-layered approach. The seniors I've watched struggle are almost always missing at least 3 of these 6 critical elements. They might have financial security but no sense of purpose, or strong friendships but deteriorating health they're ignoring, or spiritual depth but complete social isolation. Human beings are complex creatures. You can't neglect half of what makes life meaningful and expect the other half to carry you through. What I've observed, both in research and in real conversations with hundreds of people navigating their 60s, 70s, and 80s, is that the happiest seniors have consciously developed strength in all 6 areas. They're not perfect, nobody is, but they've done the work of building redundancy into their lives. When one area weakens temporarily, perhaps health takes a hit or a close friend moves away, the other 5 areas provide enough support to prevent total collapse. This isn't about becoming some superhuman version of yourself. This is about honest assessment followed by strategic action. It's about looking at your life right now and asking, if I lost my primary source of companionship tomorrow, would I be okay? If my health suddenly required more attention, do I have the physical foundation to recover? If my purpose disappeared, do I have other sources of meaning ready to expand? These aren't comfortable questions, I know, but they're necessary ones, because the time to build your infrastructure is before the storm, not during it. Let's get specific, starting with the element that everything else depends on, your physical body. And I need to be direct with you about something. If you're currently telling yourself that you'll focus on health later, that you'll start exercising once you have more time, that you'll improve your diet after one more holiday season, you're making a catastrophic mistake. Your body at 60 is not the same as your body at 40. The recovery time from injury triples. The impact of poor nutrition compounds exponentially. The muscle loss that happens naturally with age accelerates dramatically if you're sedentary. Every year you wait makes the work harder, the results slower, and the risk greater. But here's what I need you to understand about physical health that most advice misses entirely. This isn't about vanity. This isn't about fitting into old clothes or impressing anyone. This is about maintaining the basic capacity to live independently. Can you carry groceries upstairs? Can you get up off the floor if you fall? Can you walk half a mile without needing to rest? Can you travel without your body betraying you? I watched my own uncle, a brilliant man who'd been a mathematics professor, become completely homebound by 74. Not because of some unavoidable disease, but because he'd spent 2 decades ignoring basic maintenance. He stopped moving because movement became uncomfortable. He ate poorly because cooking felt like too much effort. His muscles atrophied, his balance deteriorated, and eventually a simple trip to the grocery store became an expedition fraught with anxiety. The tragedy is that it didn't have to be that way. The research is unambiguous on this point. Adults who maintain consistent, moderate exercise, even just walking and basic strength training, preserve their independence an average of 7 to 12 years longer than their sedentary peers. 7 to 12 years of being able to live on your own terms instead of being dependent on others for basic tasks. You don't need to become an athlete. You need to commit to non-negotiable minimums. 3 resistance training sessions per week, even if that's just bodyweight exercises in your living room. 7,000 steps daily, accumulated however works for your schedule. Adequate protein intake to preserve muscle mass. Sufficient sleep to allow recovery. These aren't optional luxuries. They're the price of admission to a functional later life. And if you're sitting there thinking it's too late, let me stop you. Studies on people who began strength training in their 70s and 80s show remarkable gains in muscle mass, balance, and functional capacity within just 12 weeks. Your body is more resilient than you give it credit for, but it needs you to give it the right inputs, starting now.
Now, let's talk about something that determines whether you thrive or stagnate, your willingness to remain mentally flexible. And I'm going to challenge you on something you might not want to hear. The moment you start sentences with, "back in my day," or "I'm too old to learn that," you've begun the process of making yourself obsolete. I know that sounds harsh, but I've watched it happen too many times to sugarcoat it. The world is changing faster now than at any point in human history. The technology you use, the way people communicate, the systems that run society, all of it evolves constantly. You have 2 choices: evolve with it or get left behind. Getting left behind doesn't just mean you can't use a smartphone. It means you become increasingly unable to connect with younger generations, including your own children and grandchildren. It means you miss opportunities because you don't understand new systems. It means you become more vulnerable to scams and exploitation because you can't recognize modern threats. It means your world shrinks because you've decided the world beyond your current understanding isn't worth exploring. But here's the beautiful counterpoint. Seniors who commit to continuous learning, who stay curious, who embrace change instead of resisting it, they report dramatically higher life satisfaction. They have richer conversations. They maintain relevance in their communities. They find joy in discovery that many younger people, jaded by constant change, have lost. I'm not suggesting you need to understand cryptocurrency or artificial intelligence at an expert level. I'm suggesting you need to understand them well enough to have a conversation, to ask intelligent questions, to not immediately dismiss what you don't understand. One of the most inspiring people I know is a woman named Eleanor, who's 78. Last year, she learned basic video editing because she wanted to create digital scrapbooks for her grandchildren. The year before that, she took an online course on climate science because she was tired of not understanding the debates. She reads constantly, not just novels, but articles about gene therapy and social media algorithms and whatever else catches her interest. Eleanor's mind is sharper than people 30 years younger. She's endlessly interesting to talk to. She connects with people across generational divides. And most importantly, she's never bored, never stuck, never lamenting that life has passed her by, because she's still actively participating in it. The practice here is straightforward but requires discipline. Commit to learning something genuinely new every month.
Not just consuming content, but actually stretching your brain. Take a class, online or in person. Read books that challenge your assumptions. Have conversations with people who think differently than you do. When you encounter technology or concepts you don't understand, treat it as an opportunity rather than an annoyance. Your brain is like a muscle. Use it or lose it isn't just a cliché, it's neuroscience. Neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to form new connections, continues throughout your entire life, but only if you exercise it. Cognitive decline isn't inevitable, but cognitive stagnation is a choice.
Here's a question that separates people who flourish after 60 from those who fade. What would you do if nobody was paying you, nobody was watching, and nobody was expecting anything from you? Because that's often exactly the position you find yourself in during retirement. The structure that work provided, the identity, the sense of being needed, all of it can evaporate overnight. The research on this is stark and consistent. People who retire without a clear sense of purpose experience measurably worse health outcomes. Higher rates of depression, faster cognitive decline, increased inflammation markers, even higher mortality rates. It's not retirement itself that's harmful, it's purposelessness. But here's what makes this both challenging and exciting. For possibly the first time in your adult life, you get to define purpose entirely on your own terms. Not what your employer needs, not what your family expects, not what society values. What genuinely matters to you. I've met retired executives who found profound purpose in tutoring struggling students, former accountants who discovered meaning in community theater, engineers who became passionate about historical preservation. The specific activity matters less than the feeling it generates, that you're contributing something, creating something, improving something. One gentleman I know, a former insurance salesman named Robert, spent his first year of retirement essentially waiting to die. He'd golf occasionally, watch television, putter around the house. He was bored, listless, and increasingly depressed. His doctor suggested he find something to care about. Robert, somewhat reluctantly, started volunteering at a local wildlife rehabilitation center. Within 6 months, he'd become their most dedicated volunteer. He was learning bird biology, building flight cages, even giving educational presentations at schools. His entire demeanor changed. He had reason to set his alarm. He had stories to tell. He had a sense that his presence mattered to something beyond himself. That transformation isn't unique. It's what happens when you give yourself permission to care about something again. When you stop thinking of retirement as the end of productivity and start thinking of it as the beginning of freely chosen contribution. The challenge is that purpose doesn't announce itself. You have to explore, experiment, and give yourself permission to try things that might not work out. You might join 3 groups before finding one that resonates. You might start 5 hobbies before discovering the one that truly captivates you. That's not failure, that's the process. Ask yourself, what breaks your heart? What fascinates you? What would you do if you had unlimited time and no fear of judgment? Then take one small action toward that answer. Just one, this week. Not someday, this week. Let's talk about money, because avoiding this conversation doesn't make financial reality go away. And the truth is, financial stress in your later years isn't just uncomfortable, it's corrosive to everything else we've discussed. It's hard to maintain physical health when you can't afford nutritious food or preventative medical care. It's hard to pursue purpose when you're frantically scrambling for income. It's hard to cultivate peace when you're terrified about how you'll pay next month's bills. But here's what I need you to understand about financial security that differs from conventional retirement advice. This isn't primarily about having a massive nest egg, though that certainly helps. This is about aligning your life with your actual resources and finding contentment within those boundaries. I know people with substantial savings who are miserable because they're trapped in comparison, always feeling they don't have enough relative to others. And I know people with modest means who are genuinely content because they've mastered the art of living well within their budget. The difference isn't the account balance, it's the relationship with money and what it represents. The seniors I've seen achieve real financial peace did several things consistently. First, they ruthlessly cut out spending that didn't genuinely improve their lives. Not deprivation, but conscious prioritization. They ask themselves, does this purchase actually bring me joy, or am I buying it out of habit, obligation, or image management? Second, they downsized proactively rather than reactively. They didn't wait until a health crisis forced them into a smaller home or a care facility. They chose to simplify while they still had agency, which gave them far better outcomes and terms. Third, they found ways to generate small amounts of income doing things they actually enjoyed, not because they desperately needed the money, though sometimes they did, but because having revenue streams unrelated to traditional employment gave them a sense of continued relevance and capability. Plus, it provided financial padding for unexpected expenses. I know a retired teacher who makes a few £100s monthly buying and reselling vintage books. She loves the treasure hunt, the research, the interaction with fellow collectors. The money is secondary to the engagement, but it's not nothing. It covers her utility bills and gives her breathing room in her budget. Fourth, they built emergency reserves before emergencies happened. Medical crisis, home repair, family emergency, these aren't possibilities, they're certainties. The question is whether you'll face them with resources or without them. Here's the liberating realization about money in later life. Once you've covered basic needs and a reasonable buffer, additional wealth provides diminishing returns on happiness. The difference between financial anxiety and financial peace isn't millions of pounds. It's often just a few £1,000s in accessible savings and a lifestyle aligned with income. If you're currently spending more than you're bringing in, that's a crisis that demands immediate attention. If you're just barely breaking even with no reserves, that's precarious and needs addressing. But if you've got your basics covered and some emergency cushion, you might already have enough to be content. You just need to believe it and live accordingly.
Now, we're going to venture into territory that makes some people uncomfortable, but it's too important to skip. We need to talk about spiritual foundation. And before you tune out thinking I'm about to preach religion, stay with me. This has nothing to do with what you believe about God or the afterlife. This has everything to do with how you make meaning out of the inevitable challenges of aging and mortality. Here's what happens to people without some kind of spiritual or philosophical framework as they age. Every loss becomes catastrophic. Every change feels like an ending. Every limitation triggers existential despair. Because when you have no bigger context for understanding suffering, no perspective that extends beyond your immediate circumstances, your own discomfort becomes the entire universe. Conversely, people with strong spiritual or philosophical grounding, whether that's traditional religion, Buddhist practice, Stoic philosophy, connection with nature, or any number of other frameworks, possess a resilience that looks almost like magic to outside observers. They experience the same losses, the same pain, the same challenges, but they metabolize it differently. They place it in a larger context that makes it bearable. I'm not religious in any conventional sense, but I've developed what I think of as a naturalist spirituality. Long, solitary walks in the countryside aren't just exercise for me, they're a practice of remembering that I'm part of something vastly larger and older than myself. When I'm walking through woods that have existed for centuries, watching seasonal cycles that have repeated for millennia, my personal struggles feel both real and appropriately scaled. I've also immersed myself in ancient philosophy, particularly Stoicism and Taoism. These traditions offer practical wisdom about acceptance, about focusing on what you can control while releasing what you can't, about finding peace regardless of external circumstances. When I read Marcus Aurelius writing about mortality and meaning 2,000 years ago, I'm reminded that the questions I'm grappling with are timeless. That gives me comfort. One of the books that profoundly shaped my thinking is The Path by Michael Puett, which explores how ancient Chinese philosophy applies to modern life. It taught me that happiness isn't a destination you reach by finally getting everything right. It's a practice of showing up each day, doing small good things, paying attention to what matters, and letting go of what doesn't. The specific framework you choose matters less than having one. What you need is a way of understanding your place in the world that extends beyond your individual ego and its immediate desires. You need perspective that helps you bear loss, find meaning in difficulty, and maintain equanimity when circumstances don't match your preferences. For some people, that's found in church or temple or mosque. For others, it's meditation or nature or art or philosophy. The point is cultivation of something that connects you to experiences larger than your individual life. Something that reminds you that you're part of a continuing story that started before you and will continue after you. If you currently don't have any practice that serves this function, I'd encourage you to experiment. Try a meditation app for 30 days. Read some Stoic philosophy. Take contemplative walks in nature. Attend a religious service even if you're not sure you believe. Journal about what gives your life meaning beyond personal achievement or pleasure. You're looking for something that provides comfort in solitude, perspective in difficulty, and peace in uncertainty. When you find it, protect it, nurture it. Let it become as non-negotiable as eating or sleeping, because it serves a need just as fundamental.
We've arrived at the final element, and it might be the most important of all: authentic human connection. Because here's the uncomfortable truth I promised to tell you: loneliness will kill you. Not metaphorically, literally. The research is unambiguous. Chronic loneliness increases mortality risk by 26%. It's as dangerous as smoking 15 cigarettes daily. It increases your risk of dementia by 50%. It suppresses immune function, elevates inflammation, disrupts sleep, and accelerates cognitive decline. You cannot afford to be isolated, full stop. Even if you're naturally introverted, even if you've never been particularly social, you need regular, meaningful contact with other humans. Not digital contact, not phone calls, face-to-face interaction where you can read body language, share space, experience genuine presence. But, and this is crucial, not all social contact is created equal. Having 100 casual acquaintances provides almost no protective benefit. What matters is deep connection with a small number of people. Quality over quantity isn't just a preference, it's what the longevity research demonstrates unequivocally. So the question becomes, how do you build genuine friendships in your 60s and beyond, especially if your previous social network has scattered or disappeared? Because making friends as an adult is genuinely difficult. You don't have the built-in structures of school or young parenthood that naturally create bonding opportunities. The answer is both simple and demanding. You need to show up repeatedly to activities you genuinely care about, in physical spaces where the same people gather regularly. Shared passion plus repeated exposure equals friendship. That's the formula. Notice what I didn't say. I didn't say join things because you need friends. I said join things because you care about them and let friendships emerge organically from that foundation. People can smell desperation and neediness, but enthusiasm and authentic interest are magnetic. One man I know, a retired engineer named Thomas, felt completely isolated after his wife passed away. He decided to take a woodworking class at a community college, something he'd always been curious about but never prioritized. He wasn't trying to make friends, he was trying to learn woodworking. But by showing up every Tuesday evening for 12 weeks, working alongside the same group of people, helping each other solve problems, sharing frustrations and small victories, friendships formed naturally.
2 years later, that woodworking group still meets monthly. They've built projects together, attended each other's family events, and created a support network none of them consciously set out to create. That's how adult friendships form, through repeated shared experience around common interests. Book clubs, photography groups, hiking clubs, volunteer organizations, community choirs, anything where you're genuinely engaged and seeing the same faces consistently. But here's the other critical piece. You need to be the kind of friend you want to have. That means showing up when you say you will, checking in when someone's going through difficulty, being genuinely interested in others' lives rather than just waiting for your turn to talk, offering help without keeping score, being reliable, kind, and authentic. Too many people want deep friendships, but aren't willing to do the vulnerable work of being deeply known. They keep conversations superficial, share nothing real about their struggles, and then wonder why their relationships feel hollow. You cannot have authentic connection without authentic revelation. That doesn't mean oversharing with everyone. It means identifying the 1 or 2 or 3 people who've earned your trust and letting them see the real you, struggles and all. And finally, protect those relationships fiercely. Guard against the very human tendency to take people for granted. When someone matters to you, tell them. When they do something kind, acknowledge it. When you appreciate them, express it. These small acts of relationship maintenance prevent the slow drift that destroys friendships. You don't need dozens of friends. You need 3 to 5 people you genuinely trust and care about, who reciprocate that feeling. That's the circle that will sustain you through whatever comes.
Now that we've examined all 6 elements separately, we need to talk about how they work together, because that's where the real power lies. These aren't isolated components you can pick and choose from. They're interdependent systems that reinforce each other when they're all functioning. Physical health gives you the energy and capacity to pursue purpose. Purpose gives you reason to maintain your health. Mental flexibility helps you navigate the social world and find new passions when old ones fade. Financial security reduces stress that would otherwise undermine your health and relationships. Spiritual grounding provides resilience when health fails, or finances tighten, or people disappoint you. And authentic relationships make everything else more joyful and bearable. When one element is strong, it can temporarily compensate for weakness in another area. But if you're missing 3 or 4 of these elements entirely, no amount of strength in the remaining areas can fully compensate. You need breadth across all 6, even if you're not excellent in any particular one. I think of it like a stool with 6 legs. If one leg is shorter, the stool still stands, just slightly wobbly. If 2 legs are missing, it becomes precarious. If 4 legs are missing, it collapses entirely, no matter how sturdy the remaining 2 are. So the work is building minimum viable strength in all 6 areas, then continually reinforcing whichever feels weakest at any given time. This week, maybe your health needs attention, so you focus there. Next month, perhaps a key friendship needs nurturing, so that becomes priority. The following season, maybe your sense of purpose feels depleted, so you explore new activities. This is dynamic maintenance, not a one-time fix. Your needs will shift, your circumstances will change, but the framework remains constant. Physical health, mental flexibility, purpose, prosperity, spirituality, and authentic connection. Those 6 elements consistently attended to create a life that doesn't collapse when individual circumstances shift. The seniors I know who are genuinely flourishing aren't perfect in all 6 areas, but they're consciously working on all 6 areas. They've accepted that building a resilient life is ongoing practice, not a destination you reach and then stop. That mindset shift alone, from when will I finally have it all figured out to what does my life need attention on right now, changes everything.
So let me bring this full circle. We started by acknowledging the uncomfortable reality that family support isn't guaranteed, that 3 million people in the UK alone are navigating later life essentially alone, and that number grows every year. That's the problem.
The solution isn't pretending that won't happen to you. The solution isn't desperately trying to make people stay who are naturally moving on with their own lives. The solution is building a life so rich, so purposeful, so structurally sound that you genuinely don't need anyone else to survive, even though you still deeply appreciate and cultivate the relationships you do have. That's the paradox. When you stop needing people in that desperate, clinging way, when you're complete and capable on your own, you actually become more attractive to be around. You have more to offer in relationships because you're not constantly extracting. You're abundant rather than depleted. Building this kind of life isn't easy. It requires honest self-assessment. It demands action in areas you've probably been avoiding. It means getting uncomfortable, trying new things, possibly failing at some of them, and persisting anyway. But the alternative, which is hoping circumstances will somehow magically align to take care of you, that's not a plan. That's a wish. And wishes don't keep you independent, healthy, purposeful, and connected through your 70s and 80s and beyond. So here's what I want you to do after we finish here. Look at those 6 elements: physical health, mental flexibility, purpose, prosperity, spirituality, and connection. Honestly assess which ones you're genuinely strong in right now and which ones you've been neglecting. Then pick the weakest one and commit to one specific action this week. Not someday, this week. Make a doctor's appointment, join a group, read a philosophy book, audit your finances, learn something new. Reach out to reconnect with someone. One action this week. That's how you start building the life that will carry you through whatever comes. Because that life won't build itself, and the time to begin is right now, while you still have the health, the capacity, and the opportunity to lay the foundation. You deserve a later life that's joyful, independent, and meaningful, but you have to build it deliberately. Nobody else can do that for you. So start building today.